What's the single, as specific as possible, policy proposal you would pursue in the Senate to make it easier for families to survive on one income?
It's stopping immigration. Bernie Sanders used to be able to admit that illegal immigration depresses wages for American workers. Now it's like the left has been so thoroughly wokeified that he can't talk about that anymore.
Yeah.
But I can, because like that point was right. If you make things in America and then you train Americans to do those jobs, and you don't import the whole world to do those jobs and compete with Americans, we can actually get incomes rising. In America, you ought to be able to raise a family on one single income. We used to be able to do this. Something happened, globalization, decades of inflation. Can't really do it anymore.
Honestly, that's not even based enough for us, though, Blake. I'm saying my wife she hates this Biden thing about like universal childcare, where it's like, so she's like, so the government is going to be the mother to your children.
Totally, that's what they want.
Why not let the mom be the mom to the children?
I think the most radical end of school choice, which I totally support, is paying people to homeschool their kids. Like, people would like to homeschool their children. For most people, it's not an economically viable option, right? Because wages have stagnated and you got to have people working to just make ends meet. But if you could, I think most people would choose to have one parent stay at home, educate the kids. And so if you're being taxed to pay for your children's education and you choose, I think that money should go back to you.
We're technically now doing something called unschooling, which used to be called deschooling. But that was like too hard for people. They're like, wait a minute,
by Ivan Illich. Yeah, it's like,
I know you could go there, but
that's a great book.
I'm sure it doesn't come up that often on the campaign trail, but we're ready. But unschooling right now is mostly that they like go have adventures in the woods, like they chase crickets.
And my wife does most of the homeschooling. I'm like campaigning and stuff.
Right.
I pitch in where I can, but it's like sometimes you got to sit down and they do like a certain amount of math practice every day, and it's just like they might complain about it. We don't care.
Right.
You're gonna fucking do it because you gotta have some discipline. But if we're trying to teach something and something else is happening, like the neighbor is getting their air conditioning unit like lifted off the roof because they're getting it replaced, and there's a crane. Yeah. Well, okay, we're gonna watch that for 2 hours, and the kids are gonna like then go build a model like motor to see how a crane works. And I think you got to take your cues and and sometimes they just want to go dig a hole and fill it with water and play in the mud.
Right.
But like you said, like chasing crickets, playing in the mud, like they're learning. Just because you're not teaching them something active, they're still learning. And I think that's important to recognize and respect.
I know, but that's the thing. Like, this is when you start telling people, like the like Austrian like military fascist model that underlies the American K-12 education is robbing kids of their childhood and potentially psychologically destabilizing them in adulthood. Like, people aren't ready to hear that. Like, they're not ready to, they're like, wait a minute, I thought this like K-12 is the ultimate equalizer. I get to see all these, 7-year-olds walking with their backpacks. Like, it's a big deal? And like, I mean, it's fine. It's a warm, safe place for them to be.
Yeah.
But like, you understand that childhood is supposed to be unstructured, imaginative play.
I think boys especially experience school like some kind of prison. Or that I remember thinking that way. You know, and there's a lot of clock watching, and when will it be 3, and can I finally get dismissed? And it wasn't horrible, but it was really boring, and I think probably stilting in all these ways.
And then when they get bored, you just drug them up.
Just drug him up. Oh, he has ADHD. It's like, no, actually, it's really boring. He doesn't want to be hectored for like 6 hours by some woke teacher teaching them to like hate his country. Like you said, it's like a late 19th century Prussian invention to make good soldiers.
Right, they're all blank slate units that we're going to fill up with the knowledge they need to be the cogs and the machinery of either the military or some large corporate entity.
Right.
Apply ruthless venture capital I to modern American parenting and tell me, what are a couple things that most parents should immediately stop doing?
Stop giving your kids screens. Like, how many times do you go to a family restaurant and you look around and like families should be having a dinner table conversation, but all the kids are just like glued to these devices.
I know.
And it's really bad. And Facebook knows how bad this is. They know what the endless feed and all the targeted advertising, they know what that does to a teenager's psychology. It basically destroys it, makes them feel like shit and they get depressed and suicidal, and they don't care. Because so lucrative. They just keep the machine rolling, keep the money rolling in.
Radicalizing for me is under no circumstances are you putting an Instagram-equipped smartphone in my daughter's hands.
That's
like
right.
under no, like, that's it. Like gamification of toxic, pathological high school status seeking that you could never escape from. Blake, I'm like, that's what radical. You're like, oh, am I like an anarchist now? Like, am I like Ted Kaczynski? Like, what is happening? I'm like, modernity is broken and predatory. Okay, back up though. Ruthless. Blake Masters, VC, like. Like people pitch you and you just like crush their dreams because they have bad business ideas. Take that mindset though. You said the thing you should stop doing if you're a parent. What's something you should start doing if you're a parent?
I think actually just talk frankly to them about history. Like I don't indoctrinate my kids. Like I don't expect them to talk about President Trump in the way that I might. I don't think humans are by default good. I think we have a lot of capacity for good. I think we have a lot of capacity for evil, right? And I'm Catholic, and so there's this original sin. But I feel like there are dark parts of the human heart, and if you don't think they exist in your heart, then like you're wrong, and you're a really dangerous person, right? And so I tell kids like, no one's just fully good, no one's fully bad. People have done a lot of bad things to each other in the past. When governments get all powerful, like they'll kill a lot of people. Yeah. And maybe that's like a weird thing.
That's Blake Masters' bedtime story. Let me tell you about Mao and the Cultural Revolution.
For a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old.
Come on.
But
Let me tell you about the shame spiral. Yeah.
I actually think in a weird way it like helps preserve their innocence. Because I feel like from day one they're developing they have a clear-eyed view. And they don't think everything is all roses. But of course we're going to shield them from a lot of the ugliness and toxicity out there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was always bored by history class until my late 20s because I stumbled upon the obvious thing. You get fascinated by history once you realize it's just other like evolved primates like you, It's like people. Ulysses S. Grant had to like take naps and sneeze, right? And he also wins the Civil War.
Right.
And the second you realize, wait a minute, they're actually they aren't these gods on the $50 bill.
Right.
They're as human and as frail as we are, and yet they still accomplish incredible things.
Right.
You become fascinated.
Right.
Actually, the more you humanize them, the less you deify them, the more fascinating they become.
I think that's right.
As opposed to these 2D cartoon characters you can't relate to.
Right.
Right.
This is Glenn Youngkin. He is the projected winner.
Glenn Youngkin is the governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
I mean, I'm glad to see that obviously Youngkin won, but I think specifically why he won was this education issue, specifically leaning into critical race theory is bullshit. I mean, that stuff is so toxic, and the danger would have been that Youngkin, as a sort of conventional business-minded center-right conservative, would have stayed away from it. And I think when he was staying away from it, he was polling down. He was 6 or 7 points down, I think recently, as 8 weeks ago. And then he leans into these cultural issues, which I think are super important, because I think everything is the culture war. It's like we're fighting not just a culture war, but I think a spiritual war for like the future of this country, and maybe even the West more broadly. But he leaned into that, and I think he was rewarded for it. It's just, he activated that, you want that million mom army that knows that their kids are not in good hands with the woke progressive so-called experts. I think for the longest time they were boiling the frog, and I think the schools were messed up. I think the teachers' unions were messed up and borderline criminal already in 2015, 2016, 2017. But like, you couldn't attack them. It was still somehow, because if to attack the teachers' unions, my gosh, you're just those are the people that are entrusted with teaching our children.
Yeah, come on.
And are you anti-child? But now it's like people have seen their true colors. They wanted schools closed. Then they gaslight us and they say, oh, we were trying to open schools up from the beginning. It's like, no, you weren't. They demanded that the teachers be vaccinated before showing up to work, even though like everybody else showed up. Nurses showed up to work before the vaccine was available. But no, you have to close the schools because you couldn't possibly put teachers in an unsafe place. And then it's like, fine, well, then the vaccine was developed and you vaccinated them and they still didn't want to go back to school.
Yeah.
Right. And now that this is like, they know they overplayed their hand, so they're trying to rewrite history, but like we remember. People remember, like the teachers' unions, they wanted kids at home. They wanted kids at home on the Zoom screen, right? Addicted to the screen, listening to like left-wing toxic CRT, 1619, hate your country curriculum.
Yeah.
And like we saw this. It's like the one silver lining of the pandemic was like we saw like, all of this.
I know, yeah.
And we're not going to forget it.
I feel like you and he and a DeSantis are very much, this is like Trumpism 2.0 right here, right? And someone who retained a certain level of skepticism about the entire Trump project, I like the idea of Trumpism, like Trumpism that forces the Republican Party to become more populist, but that is drained of any narcissistic lunacy.
But I think Trump came and busted up the sort of center-right establishment, busted up the Paul Ryan party. Like, he was willing to say things on that debate stage in 2016 that other Republicans weren't.
Right.
The Iraq War was a mistake, right? Or I think, I think Ted Cruz was trying to bait him into saying, like, you're going to have socialized medicine, Donald, and Trump didn't take that bait, but he said, we're not going to let people die on the streets.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't let people die on the streets.
Yeah.
And if the Republican if the Republican position on healthcare is like, if you don't have insurance, sorry, we're going to let you die on the streets. Like,
sign it.
That's not going to do it.
I know.
That's bad politics. It's also bad policy. And we still have a lot to figure out on healthcare, but Trump was willing to point us in the right direction.
Even the people going to Tea Party rallies still liked Medicare, right? And it was like, that lesson never got learned.
That's
and
right.
I know, and at least he articulated it.
That's right. That's right. So that was something new. And I think we're seeing, new leaders like myself. I mean, I'm trying to pick up the torch, and Youngkin won in Virginia. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance, my friend, is running in Ohio, and I think he'll win. And this is the question. It's like, which way do we go? But to me, that's exciting. We're at a real crossroads. And I think if we get it right, we have a chance to actually save the country.
Kids don't get the vaccine, get COVID very often. Kids don't get COVID very often. It's unusual for that to happen. So you're the safest group of people in the whole world.
Unvaccinated children of a certain age, greater than 2 years old, should be wearing masks.
It's almost like the mask for these kids has become a physical totem of a more like ambient, like risk-adverse bitch acidness that's just kind of like in the air. And now you're actually getting to see it physically manifest.
Yeah.
Like I care about my kids having free range adventures and not micromanaging their childhoods, because we know that cultivates a deep psychological fragility.
Right.
But the parents that do like to micromanage their childhoods are also the ones that throw their 4-year-olds in masks.
That's right.
And they don't realize like there is a cost to be had in being excessively safety oriented.
Totally.
You actually rob children of opportunities to develop internal resilience.
It's like
right?
not letting a child climb a tree, and the logical extension, of course, is put the child in a white padded room and like never give them any stimulus at all.
Right.
And they'll be really safe. And it's just obviously
right.
I mean, but I think like making your kid wear a mask for like years on end is actually closer to that than merely not letting them climb a tree or like climb a risky fence or something.
Right.
Like it's really, and then you see people come out like experts. Again, experts. What a bad 18 months it's been for experts, right? But they're still coming out with bad takes. And one of them is like, oh, children don't need to see. Don't worry about that. You don't need to see faces, because the brain is pliable, and they'll find other ways to communicate. And it's like, holy shit, we're saying like small and infant to toddler children like don't need to see their parents' faces. They don't need to see human beings like express and talk.
Right.
And that's not a part of neurological development. Everybody knows that's bullshit. Like, I don't care what study you say is peer-reviewed and put in front of me. Like, we know that kids need to see other kids' faces and adults' faces to be normal.
Right.
And I don't know, they just want you in the pod, they want you eating bugs, they want your kid masked up, they want him vaccinated. It's just about control, it's about social control.
Well, we're doing a video about kids in masks, and part of it is because it's like the ultimate representation of technocratic arrogance, in the sense of like, for conservatives, part of it is like, there are systems you cannot control, that you can't run through your McKinsey PowerPoint presentation and understand the intricacies of them. They exist for a reason that maybe is going to be mysterious to you, right? And jumping in and trying to control that mystery oftentimes has catastrophic adverse effects. And for the kids in masks, it's like the most pointed example of that.
Yep.
It's like, okay, maybe you put them in a mask for a couple months, it's not gonna permanently psychologically destabilize them. But if you're gonna jump into this ancient process of like humans building a personality when they're 3, and you're gonna deprive them of those nutrients, you better have a damn good reason, right?
Yep.
And they don't have good reasons. There's
They
like
don't,
either no
COVID
studies.
doesn't hurt kids.
Well, you can't.
To a first approximation, like it does not hurt children, right?
But it is like, it's remarkable though, because I think there's a lot of like anxiety and depression we know from the stats, particularly among young people. And they tend to want to assume that it has some grand romantic cause, like it must be because of Trump, or it must be because of some...
The glorification of your own trauma.
Right.
I'm traumatized, therefore I must be special, or something like that.
But it's really like, you know what, you should actually just stop, you should get off your smartphone and like go run a mile and then go have a face-to-face interaction with a good friend that's not mediated by digital products, right?
Yep.
And it's like, that actually would solve 90% of your problems.
It would.
It's like, I'm saying, getting the orange man out of office or getting a beautiful black woman, Kamala Harris, into office is not going to solve your shit. It's not going to solve it.
Well, that latter one definitely won't solve much. No, move your body, get some sunlight, be a human being, and then you'll feel like a human being.
Right. Although I was semi-expecting you to do like a real deep, like kind of Thiel contrarianness, where suddenly you like mount a defense of Kamala Harris. Like that's it. But it's not
that contrarian.
Yeah, I know. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah.
Universal basic income.
Down, thumbs down.
Why?
It's good to even have to work for a living.
Right.
As long as you have jobs to do, as long as you're like properly equipped to do them, as long as you're living in a political community that's taking care of people who genuinely need help. Like I believe in a safety net, but I think the whole concept of a safety net is like if something really bad happens, you fall, you bounce on the net, it gets you back up. And I don't want this permanent, everybody's on the dole situation. And I think that's what the left wants. They just want the nanny state to take care of you, cradle to grave. Here's your check every month. Here's your cricket meal. Here's your, and you already start to see this. People are addicted to Netflix and then Postmates, and you never have to leave your bedroom and get some sunlight and see other people. And if your material needs are taken care of by some allegedly, nice government that's just taking care of you, I feel like that's actually very spiritually demotivating.
Right.
You want to work. I don't want people to work shit jobs. I wish we didn't outsource tons of productive jobs. So I think we do need to change the way things look here in this country and give people more opportunity, but like the answer is not to just mail them checks. I think we started to see that with COVID. It's like all these stimulus checks.
Right.
And then now it's time to go back to work. Pandemic's, to a first approximation, pandemic's over. It's time to go back to work. And people are having a really hard time hiring people at 15, 16, 17 bucks an hour because like the unemployment benefits, when you add them all up, can make it more attractive to do nothing.
It does feel like the neurotic, like Vassar grad that is using Netflix as a replacement husband. Those are the people who were in charge of our pandemic response. It does.
Yeah.
But what it pushed back a little bit. The Charles Murray analysis is though rapid. If you're Blake Masters, right? The radical changes in the global economy are great because you got gifted with a high IQ. But we know that there's a lot of people that weren't gifted with high IQs, and whatever skills they have are rapidly deteriorating in value in the global economy. And that they might ultimately be staring down a reality in which they simply cannot do anything that's of value enough to other people to generate a sufficient income for themselves. And that in the society, we still have to afford them a basic level standard.
Well, I think you do have to make sure that people are able to live. I just think a safety net is a better way to do it. I think retraining is a better way to do it. I think economic tools to push back on this relentless sort of globalization, this relentless economic homogenization throughout the whole world, that's a better way to do it. If it's still not working, like I don't think we should be letting people starve. Or I think we should, basically build housing to solve homelessness, right?
Right.
But you want these things to be temporary programs that give people skills. Maybe some people, you got to take their life into receivership and actually like educate them and give them the skills that they need. But that is way better than keeping them on the dole. I actually view UBI as oppressive because I think it's basically about keeping people subjugated and dependent. And I want people to be independent. And so you may have to invest in people, right? And maybe some conservatives won't like that because you're spending money on poor people.
Right.
No, you have to do that. But I think you invest in them so that they can fly on their own. That's the goal. It's not to just create and perpetuate this permanent underclass.